Greetings, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Classic Album War. Today, we're going to look at two landmark debut albums, one from 1973, one from 3 years later in 1976. And I have a very special guest to help me through this episode, none other than Jeff Young, ex-guitar shredder from Megadeth and a fantastic solo artist in his own right. Jeff, welcome back to the show. We're so happy to have you on again.
Thank you very much. How you doing? How's everybody doing?
I'm doing good. Hopefully everybody's doing good. They've been waiting for this episode all day, Jeff. So I think they're doing fantastic and they're excited. They're excited. So Jeff and I have both talked about these albums, and one specifically a lot over the last couple of months. So I could think of no one better to kind of help me out with this album war than Jeff. And I'm going to ask Jeff to kind of lead us in and talk about the Montrose album and kind of the tunes on the album, what this album means to him, the importance of the album in the history of like heavy music, so on and so forth. So Jeff, I'll kick it over to you to get started here.
Well, you sure threw some heavy nostalgia at us this week, my friend. And there's so much nostalgia with both albums. The Montrose album hits so close to my heart and musical soul. Thanks to a young buddy of mine who had two IDs that could sneak me into a local bar called the Echo in downtown Dayton, Ohio. And thanks in large part to a band from Detroit called Tight. First song they played in their set every night at the weekly Drink and Drown was Rock the Nation. When I first heard it, I thought it was an original tune. You know, it was so good. I talked to the guitar player on a break and he let me know it was a little Montrose action. So I ran out and got that album. And through my cover band days, I think I ended up covering every song. Rock the Nation, Space Station No. 5, Tight also covered that tune. And just the production on the whole record, especially that tune for the time. Just such a cutting edge record all the way around. You got Bad Motor Scooter, Space Station No. 5, I Don't Want It, Closing Outside 1, Good Rockin' Tonight, Rock Candy, One Thing on My Mind, and Make It Last. That's an album that's indelible and will last on and on. And I actually got to see Montrose, not with this lineup, and don't want to neglect mentioning how, you know, ahead of his time and at such a young age, think about Sammy Hagar's vocals on this record. But I did get to see Montrose on the Open Fire tour and a couple times with Gamma. But hey, I also got to see Boston on the first album tour. So there's a lot of nostalgia there.
Lucky you.
Yeah. So that's Montrose in a nutshell for me. A lot of heavy, really great guitar sound, you know, heavy drums, good hard rock vocals from Hagar. Just a great, you know, debut all the way around. And, you know, we got to mention produced by Ted Templeman, and Eddie Van Halen sang the praises of Montrose. And you can really hear, especially in the first Van Halen albums, and so many other players, you can hear that Montrose influence. It's indelible.
Yeah, and I think you talk about Eddie Van Halen, and by the way, this is the first Montrose album cover there, and the back is the guys on the back. Tom Schultz from Boston also talked a lot about how Montrose, and specifically that first album, was kind of the blueprint for everything they did as well. And I don't know about you, Jeff, but I think one of the great things about the Montrose debut is how excellent it is in its simplicity. I mean, those songs are compact, they're to the point. He doesn't play a ton of solos on there, but he didn't need to. They're short, they're concise, they're tasty, the riffs are great. Just everything about that album just really, really works. But it's so different than some of the other kind of heavy albums that were coming out at the time. So, you know, you mentioned earlier it was probably years ahead of its time, and I definitely think it was. I mean, you agree with that?
I concur. My mind's a little distracted by the loud blower that's outside the house right now. Can you hear that? I mean, it's
barely. That's okay.
it's not quite as lovely as the sound of a bad motor scooter. We'll just
definitely not, right?
we'll leave it at that. No,
Cool.
the Boston album, you know, from Hitch a Ride. I mean, More Than a Feeling was the first song I learned how to play on guitar. That Stairway to Heaven, Smoke on the Water, all the usual suspects. But an interesting aside, and thanks to Chris Poland, I inherited his one space Tom Schultz Rockman. You know, a lot of guys knew the little handheld Rockman headphone amp, but there was also the rack mount version. And that was heard on the entire Megadeth tour, So Far So Good So What tour. And even on my Reverb Nation, check out a song with Jeff Scott Soto, Mr. Cool. You can hear that very preamp that Chris left behind. I inherited, and that's the one piece of gear I regret selling, because it had a sound like no other. You can tell just on that track, Mr. Cool, my Reverb Nation, because that's through one of those baby Marshall mini stacks.
Yep.
Frightening sound. So Mr. Schultz was on to More Than a Few Things. And I don't want to neglect to mention the foreplay. He was very good with the foreplay. That song, just in and of itself, you know, forget when it goes into long time, but just the keyboard work, the guitar work, the building, the orchestration of that song is, you know, it's unlike any other in the fact that it was so innovative, groundbreaking, yet catchy that even classic rock radio plays that whole long opus, foreplay, long time. And they don't do that often.
Yeah, well, they kind of go hand in hand. To me, I always kind of treat them as one long tune. So, you know, you brought up an interesting point before about how the fact that Tom is a great keyboard player. Is there any truth to the rumor that he actually started playing keyboards before he started playing guitar? I thought I heard that somewhere. Wouldn't surprise me, because he's a damn good organ player.
I did hear that as well.
Okay, all right. So I thought so. So Boston debut, and you know, we should mention that the Montrose album back in the day when it was originally released was not a huge seller, but over time that has gone in excess of platinum sales, at least here in the U.S. So it has become a steady seller over the years, and I think its legendary status and influence has just grown as the decades have kind of gone by, as opposed to this album, which has sold like 17 million copies here in North America. So it's, you know, as we call it, this was a beast of a seller. I mean, you know, you got More Than a Feeling. Jeff mentioned the first song he ever learned on guitar, a huge FM radio hit. Peace of Mind, my personal favorite song on this album. Foreplay, Long Time, we just mentioned. Great organ and guitar playing. Barry Goudreau, Tom Schultz trading off some solos on there. Rock and Roll Band, another radio hit. Smokin', another tune they played on FM radio. Hitch a Ride, Something About You, another underrated tune on this album, I think. And then Let Me Take You Home Tonight. So like top to bottom, just really memorable tunes. Production is stellar. The recording techniques are stellar, and just a really memorable album. So when you kind of look at both of these next to each other, even though one came before the other and one definitely influenced the other, I think they kind of have a lot in common, even though one is definitely more well-known than the other. So I don't know, Jeff, what do you think? I already know what your opinion is going to be. Which one means more to you? Which is your favorite? Which is your go-to album out of these?
I got to go with the deep nostalgia and the early influence and the first Montrose album, 100%. Although, and I do agree, Something About You, I think that's one of my favorite songs on that record.
Yeah. And I think why some of us might like that song so much is because that was not one of the radio tunes. So it's like when you listen to the Boston album, you hear that song and it's like it's not played to death, and it's a really strong tune anyway, and it's one of the heavier tunes on the album. So yeah, I mean, for me, I love this album a lot, and I have for a long time, but this is just like part of my life so much, you know, since it first came out. And I have such a history with this record. And as much as I love this one, I got to go with Boston for the win. But there's no right or wrong answer, right? They're both great. It's okay to love both to death, right? And I know a lot of our viewers are going to chime in. I think on the Facebook page, Boston is winning, but Montrose is doing pretty well for itself. So it really doesn't matter, right? Everybody likes what they like. And all I can say is if you're watching this show and you haven't heard this album, that's hard to believe. But if you haven't, go out immediately and check this out. Whether you go listen to it on YouTube or buy it or stream it, whatever you do, because this is one of the most important heavy rock albums of the 70s. I mean, I don't even know how much more we can say about it, right? It's that important of an album.
I can say a little more.
That's why I have you.
Well, I was fortunate and honored and humbled to have the opportunity to play the first Ronnie Montrose Remembered concert at the NAMM show a few years in Anaheim, California. And Ronnie's wife, Lesia, was in attendance, and she was just such a sweet and genuine lady. I think she's representing Ronnie's legacy so very well. And it was just an honor to play. I got to play Bad Motor Scooter with first time since Megadeth, Dave Ellefson on bass, Jimmy DeGrasso on drums, Doug Aldridge on guitar, Gilby Clarke, Brad Gillis, and yours truly. It's on my YouTube channel. That's a great memory. So just so many memories with that and dissecting that album. You know, both albums taught me how to play guitar. So I wouldn't be anywhere without Boston or Montrose.
And for those of you who haven't seen that clip that Jeff mentioned, it's awesome. I watched it a few times. It's really, really cool. I love seeing you saddle up next to Gillis, trading licks. That's pretty damn cool.
Brad is such a cool cat. That night he kept, during sound check, he was busting, I think it was a high E string on his Floyd Rose. He runs upstairs in the dressing room. He's like, "Hey, Jeff, you got any high E strings?" I made him sign my set of D'Addario's. I owe you one high E string, Brad Gillis. Just for the record, he still owes me that string.
Oh, there you go. Jeez. Well, if my friend Butch is watching, Butch talks to Brad regularly. You better let him know that.
Yeah.
One thing we really didn't mention too, we talk a lot about Sammy Hagar and how incredible he was on the Montrose album. We really got to mention Brad Delp here, because for my money, one of the greatest hard rock singers of the 70s and the early 80s. Man, that guy, what a range he had, and what a unique, powerful voice. He's greatly missed. Another, sadly, Ronnie and Brad are not with us anymore today, and it's both are tragedies of a very similar nature, but both extreme talents. So, any other last tidbits on these two great albums, Jeff? I think we kind of were split here 50-50, but I think the important thing is we both love both albums, so there's no right or wrong, and they're both fantastic.
Yeah, we agree that both albums are legendary, and everyone should own both and spend both on vinyl often.
Yep, exactly. So everybody let us know what your favorite is of these two legendary albums in the comments below. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find you on the web?
Oh, so very many places, but but most critically, you can check out my radio show. Pete Pardo is going to be my guest this coming Tuesday night, 7:11 Eastern Standard Time, 4:11 Pacific Standard Time. Whatever time it is, wherever you are on the planet and beyond, please tune in. We're doing part 2 of Criminally Underrated Guitarist Exposed. I did part 1 this Tuesday. If you want to check it out, it's streaming right now at jeffyoungjams.com, along with 8 years of archives. Pete's been on, I think this will be your 5th time.
I think
coming on this time. So very excited about that. Excited about them apples. ReverbNation.com/Guitar Ninja. YouTube.com/JeffYoungTube. And that should get you all you need to know and more.
And Jeff's working on a lot of new music, from what I understand. So we're all waiting to hear that. If you haven't checked out his tune Monsoon, that's the most recent one. You definitely need to do so. It's a pretty wild, blazing instrumental with a lot of cool atmospheric touches and melodies and solos and top-notch stuff. So keep them coming, Jeff.
That's a barn burner, right? I'm working on it.
Cool. Very good. Very good. All right, everybody. Well, thanks again. Remember, go onto the Facebook page and vote for your favorite of these two amazing albums. And for Jeff Young, I am Pete Pardo. We'll see you real soon. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We'll be back tomorrow morning with another classic album war. So we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.